This is the Sick'em Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sick'em Podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics. Now, here are your hosts, Katie Smith and the voice of the Bears, John Morris.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's Sick'em Podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network, a production of Baylor Athletics, just like it says in the open. John Morris, Katie Smith with us, and Katie, fun week again as David Kaye joins us. David, our guest, Associate AD for External Affairs Operations is the formal title, but so much goes into that. I mean, we're going to have a lot to talk about, and it'll be fun with David.
It will be fun. I think anytime that you can get someone to put on a headset that's usually on the other side of all this stuff is just my favorite thing. And so David Kaye is one of those that, you know, you never talk about David Kaye. He doesn't want any credit for anything he does. And so this is just like Christmas morning for me to get to have David Kaye in here.
Truth be told, we had to twist your arm a little bit, David, to do this, right?
Well, I'm not super comfortable talking about myself. My career has been promoting athletes and coaches. And
sure.
So, I prefer to stay in the background. But
all right. Well, today you're front and center. You're in the foreground, and we appreciate you allowing us to do this. And the title, Associate AD for External Affairs Operations, people say, number one, what is that? And number two, it's a new title and a new role for you.
Yeah, it's a lot, I know, and I have people all the time go, so what do you actually do? And the best way I can describe it is that Jovan Overshone is my direct supervisor. She's been my direct supervisor. She oversees all of external, which is it's creative services, communications, marketing, fan engagement, resource development, multimedia rights, all of that. There's almost 60 full-time employees in external.
Wow.
So this role, it's newly created, is essentially supposed to serve as a chief of staff type role for external and just kind of help her manage projects. Lots of things coming down the pipe and just take whatever I can off of her plate. She's also now the football sport administrator newly this year. So it's just been a lot that's been added. And so, okay, we got to find a way to give her some help. And it just aligned perfectly with I was trying to get off the road. Last year I was the SID for football and men's basketball.
An impossible job, by the way, for one person.
Well, for 1 year it's feasible.
Sure.
But
is it?
Well,
I'm just not sure it is. Like I thought about David Kaye so regularly,
right.
Concerned. Like, how do you balance the volume of both of those sports when they start crossing? I mean, this time of year last year when it starts crossing over.
So truly had incredible help from the communications team, Max Calderon and Matt Roberts on football, and Matt also helped me on basketball, made a huge difference. But I would also say anytime someone asks me about that, it's like so blessed to have those two head coaches to work with.
True.
Because they were so understanding and so appreciative of whatever we were doing. And it made it feasible, whereas I can't imagine doing that at another Power 5 school just because the coaches' expectations can be out of whack.
Yeah.
And so truly it was because of the coaches and the staff members on communications that it was feasible. But again, like that's not what you want to do long term. It was not, football truly is like 7 days a week, but the benefit is once you get through football season, you can breathe. Mm-hmm. And, in that last year, it was like, okay, well, we're right into basketball season. We're in the middle of basketball season. Yeah. And so it was really difficult for a year, but I knew I'm only doing this a year and we'll figure it out after that. And so that's how we were able to do it. And I'm so thankful the way it worked out. It just aligned perfectly that Jovan needed help. And I was able to hire Brent Ingram to run our communications team. I honestly exceeded all expectations. He is phenomenal, terrific leader, humble, appreciates help. I try to be very careful not to step on his toes because I was in that role for 13 years. And he's just so appreciative of anything we do and just a really, really good person. And it's such a terrific fit at Baylor.
Yeah, that's awesome. You look at the volume of what you did when you were doing football and men's basketball at the same time, and then now in this new role and the need for this role that you're in. Go way back with me here, David, but when you were media relations student intern at Baylor, right? That was kind of your start of Baylor Athletics. I mean, there's probably 150 things that have changed, but what's kind of like the biggest difference from what Baylor Athletics looked like then to what it looks like now?
Whew, that is, I'm sure I'll think of another answer later and be like, I should have said that. But truly just you think of the resources that go into athletics now. And back in the day, I got hired by Heath Nielsen as a student worker, and he was running all of the social media. Like, he was leading the charge of Baylor Athletics being involved in social media. and the SIDs did all of it. And now, I mean, at the time, we didn't even have a graphic designer helping us. Or, we had Inside Baylor Sports, obviously, which you led, JMO.
Yeah.
That was our video.
Right.
And now we have creative teams, and truly, that's an area that we are continuing to pour resources into. We need more. But, I mean, you think of football, we have 4 full-time creative staff members working just football. And that's a huge change because back in the day, it was the SIDs. So Heath, me, Brad Sheffield, Sean Dory, people like that. We're taking videos on our phones, which are like iPhone 3s and 4s back then.
All right.
And those are getting shared on social media, which if you did that today, oh my gosh, you'd be ridiculed.
Yeah.
What is the quality of this?
Yeah.
But at the time, and you deal with different coaching staffs who want different branding on social media. We had a lot of fun, 10 years ago with a little more edgy, whereas now it's okay. We expect to be good. We need to win with class and integrity, and it's just changed.
Right.
I'm not saying it's good or bad. Everything changes over time, but I think where we are is really awesome.
Since you threw it back there, Katie, let's throw it back a little further. You're from Katy and came to Baylor. Did you intend to get into this line of work, this business, when you came to Baylor?
Not at all.
Really?
I love that.
I started as a finance major, and it took me half of a semester.
Half
to
a
figure out
semester.
that was not
You
for
could
me.
have been in the business office.
I
What
know.
a time we would have
That's
had.
right.
I regret that I didn't. It was truly my fault. I just didn't perform very well in those classes. I was very immature. So anyway, long story short, there was a deployment in the middle of my Baylor career, and when I came back, I changed majors to PR. I basically, during the deployment, I realized I liked writing. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to go journalism. And then when you do journalism at Baylor, you either go PR or you go news editorial. And I was like, okay, I'll do PR. And totally lucked into this job. I saw a friend, Haley Perkins at the time, working a basketball game. And I was like, well, I need a job. It'd be cool to work at basketball games. So I asked her, and she was like, oh, I'll connect you with my boss, which turned out to be Heath Nielsen, and came and talked to Heath, and he basically said, look, usually we look for freshmen, sophomores, because by the time we train them up, you want to get a few years out of them.
Sure.
And I was a junior at the time, and he said, but I really respect that you're a veteran, so, we'll give you a chance. And the rest, truly, the rest is history. They gave me a chance, threw me right in the fire. I worked with Larry Little, helping with baseball, and so it was totally luck. I had no idea that what she was doing was PR related.
Yeah.
And I got into this, and it was like a week into it, I was like, this would be a really cool career.
How about that?
I'm
That's
glad
great.
you did. You're just kind of good at it. So.
Yeah, exactly. It stuck, didn't it?
It definitely stuck. And it's such a cool thing, and it's cool to do things like this and think back on, it is actually a really cool job. There's stressful times.
Yeah.
But it's a good reminder at times of hey, the things we get to discuss. We do donor dinners on the road with football, and getting to talk through some experiences with them, it's really cool. It's good. Like I said, good reminder for all of us when we are stressed out that this is a pretty cool job.
Yeah. And you mentioned deployment, and you are a veteran. We want to talk more about that with Veterans Day this week, November 11th. But, again, back to your current role under external affairs, you kind of touched on all those areas. It's really anything that's sort of outreaching, isn't it, from athletics, the external area that you and Jovan sort of take care of.
So, essentially, it's what the fans see.
Yeah.
And so if the fans see it, that pretty much falls into external. Internal would be obviously business, office, the finances, compliance, facilities operations, things like that. So external is, if you think about it, if the fan sees it, that falls under external, which is a huge undertaking.
It is.
In a lot of different areas, and a lot of people that we need to make sure just talking on the same page. And that's really something that I'm tasked with, is making sure we're all communicating well. Like I shared a text this morning with everybody of showing ESPN plus subscriber growth from when it launched in the Big 12 now, to where it is now. And it's like, hey, this is important for people to know. I know there's a lot of resistance to streaming, but, it started at 2 million subscribers, and now it's at 24 million in the last 3 years since Big 12 now launched. So just, giving people information and making sure everybody understands and is on the same page.
Yeah, I think back to my time as a student athlete, and what it made it so special was you just kind of show up and everything's done, right?
Yeah.
And when I think of the people behind the scenes that make that happen, I think of you, David, and just the way that there's so much that goes into what's on Twitter, what's on Facebook, Instagram, everything. And I think fans, sometimes we just consume, right? We see it and we're like, oh, that's great. I know everything about the sports programs going on. And there's so much work that goes into that. So I love that we have people like David Kaye to do that.
It's it is a lot that goes into it, but we have a massive staff to handle it. And it's really just a matter of making sure everybody is working together. And I think at Baylor we do a really good job of that. I think everybody who works here is a mission fit, and it's just different. You know, I've had people ask me if I want to work at another school, would I want to be an AD someday? And who knows? But to me, working here at Baylor, I've been here 14 years now, it's a passion because it's Baylor. Mm-hmm. You have to love what you do, but doing it at a place that you also loved, it makes it that much sweeter.
You did have to step away, go to another school. I guess your first full-time job, right, at South Alabama.
Yeah, I was graduating in May of 2008, and I was getting married 2 months later, and I was applying for jobs literally everywhere. Like, just where can I get an internship for a year and get my foot in the door? And South Alabama was one that called me actually an hour and a half before my wedding. A guy named Kevin Beasley called me and said, hey, are you busy right now? And I said,
just a little.
I'm getting married in an hour and a half, but I got time to talk.
That's great.
And he was like, no, I'll call you back. And I was like, no, we are talking right now. Because we want to know where we're moving.
Yeah.
You know, Emily at the time was working at the Waco Trib as a crime reporter, and she was willing to leave her job to go wherever I had to go. And truly, I applied at the Big East in Providence, Rhode Island. I applied at the Big 12 and interviewed there. And you know, it's just truly, it could be anywhere. It's like we're open. And I honestly didn't know hardly anything about South Alabama at the time, but went to work there, did baseball, helped with football, which was really cool because it was their first season of football.
Oh, wow.
They launched the program. And worked there a year as an intern. Then they made me full-time, and I felt terrible about it, still do, but a few months later after they made me full-time, I had an opportunity to come back to Baylor. Heath had called me and said, hey, our baseball SID job's coming open, and we think you'd be a good fit. So, didn't anticipate leaving South Alabama that quickly after they made me full-time. They really bent over backward to make that happen. And we had bought a house there. I mean, this is the 2009 housing crisis. And they were doing the incentives for first-time home buyers. So we're like, hey, let's take advantage of that. We're planning to be here. They made me full-time. And then, so before we had even moved into the new house, we'd closed on it, but we hadn't moved in yet. I got the offer at Baylor, and it was like, oh no, we bought a foreclosure. So I was, repairing flooring and things like that. And I'm doing all of this knowing we're not going to live here. I just have to do it so we can sell the house. Yeah. It was a mess.
Wow. How about that?
So at that point, when you take that first SID position, were you thinking then, okay, I think this is a career I want. I see myself doing this long term, or was it kind of, this is a good step in the right direction. Let's see where it goes.
It's funny you say that because I think a lot of people getting into the SID field now are like, hey, this will be where I'll start and we'll see where it goes. Yeah. That's been my experience in hiring people is, but I always knew, I want this to be a career. I like working in sports and my major's in PR. And, I never really felt like, I'm not going to say in the time I've been working, I've never thought about switching to another field.
Sure.
But I did intend to do it as a career.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Good. You and Emily, you get the chance to come back to Baylor. You together, you both jump at that. You come back to Waco, and here you are, and you're still here in Baylor Athletics.
Yeah, it's crazy to think about everything that's happened since 2009 when I came back here. Yeah. I mean, obviously we don't need to rehash everything, but it's been ups and downs,
sure.
And you've seen it all. And we came back. Emily continued working from home. She had gotten a job at the University of Mobile, so she was working from home pre-COVID, and she did that 2 years, and then she got on at Baylor, and now she works in advancement. She is director of advancement communications. I hope I got that correct. And I was the baseball SID, and in year 2 of baseball SID, I got to help more with football. Did 3 years total with baseball. The 2012 Feed the Beaver year was my last
great
one.
season,
Super
right,
cool.
right.
Yeah, 24-game winning streak, ranked number 1, really, really cool. And then summer of 2012, got to move over to men's basketball, and so was with them for 10 years. And then last summer, we were looking to hire a football SID, and we just couldn't find the right fit. And so that's where it was, hey, can you do this for a year? And I had honestly, there was talk of, would you be willing to move to football? And I just kind of had said, listen, I'm ingrained with men's basketball. I honestly, there's a lot to it, but I have some loyalty to Coach Drew and the program and the staff, and I don't want to leave them for football. I don't want to send them the message that football is more important.
Yeah.
And obviously everyone understands the revenue aspect of it, but it's just there's a lot there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to do that, but I'll do both for a year, and we'll see where it goes from there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's just crazy. And in the middle of that, when I was doing football, I got an opportunity or when I was doing men's basketball, I got an opportunity to take over leading the communications team. So was doing that from, I guess, 2017 until we hired Brent, and he took over leading the communications team. So, yeah, 5 years of that, and lots of great people have come through that staff in that time. And, it's been a wild ride over 14 years now.
Including a national championship
Yes.
with men's basketball through COVID. Man, the way you navigated all of that, the national championship run in a bubble was amazing.
Well, I'll just tell you this. It was like an SID's dream, truly. Like being gone from home for 5 weeks was really, really
Sure.
hard. Like, I don't want to discount that. But we had the 8th floor of the Marriott in Kansas City. It was all Baylor. Everybody had their own room, so you could get away if you needed to.
Yeah.
But for doing interviews, because everything was virtual, and so I don't have to get anyone really anywhere. There was one point I had like 5 interviews going at the same time. Just had guys in the room. You go in there and make sure it looks appropriate, get them set up on the Zoom, and then you're off to the next one, setting up the next one. And it truly, like, not having to track anyone down, you knew where they were. Like, it made it so much easier.
Yeah.
So it was hard mentally being gone for 5 weeks, and but we were. Coach Drew talks all the time about, like, our guys liked each other. They wanted to be there. And the teams that would lose, you could see they were just ready to go home.
Yeah.
And we didn't. It was truly like I wasn't dying to leave. I wanted to stay because staying meant we were winning.
Yeah.
And it was so important to to the program and the team and those guys. And it just, what an unforgettable experience. I really want to win another national championship because I feel like our fans were cheated out of it.
Right.
To only have 25% attendance or whatever it was. Just not the same. And how cool would it be to do it this year down in Houston?
Yeah.
But it was truly a one-of-a-kind, like, you'll never duplicate that again. Let's hope not. But it was really, really cool to be a part of that.
The championship, yes. The COVID part of it.
Yeah.
No.
And it
the
was
bubble part.
Yeah.
And it was cool because they let us break the bubble after the game.
Sure.
Which you're sitting there going, okay, this just makes sense. We're all going home tomorrow. What's the difference?
Yeah.
But, so we go over to the convention center, and they had a ballroom open for us where we could visit with our family. So I got to hug my wife for the first time in five weeks. And it was really cool because I got to take her around and introduce her to a lot of the guys who she hadn't met because
that's right.
we were kind of keeping separate at that time. And introducing her to players and their parents. And Davion said something that was just so cool. He introduced me to his mom and talked about how I had helped him get better at interviewing. And honestly,
wow.
I didn't even feel like I had. I just was doing what we always do. And Davion himself had kind of identified, I need to get better at this. And he never said anything to me. He just kind of worked on it. And that was so cool for Emily to hear because she kind of in that moment was like, okay, you are actually helping people.
Yeah.
This isn't, because she had really struggled in those 5 weeks. Our dog actually died
while
I was in the bubble.
Oh, great.
And, it was just things like that happen. And it's like, I literally am not there. She had to do it on her own.
Yeah.
That was awful. So it was cool for her to hear someone like Davion, one of my all-time favorite players, say that I actually helped him.
What a compliment.
Yeah. I was going to say, going off of that, like in your career, when you see all these players go on to play professionally, to do more and more, is that kind of a sense of pride that you have a relationship with those guys? And like, is there a lot of growth that you've seen in their ability to interact with media and things like that?
Yeah, it is cool to see when they come in as freshmen, a lot of them. Now, I mean, honestly, it's gotten better and better over the years because they're doing more and more in high school.
Yeah.
But to see, hey, they struggle, they're uncomfortable, and just like you build relationships with them, you have to build a relationship first before you can really do any coaching. Because if you're going in and saying, hey, you need to work on this and this, and they don't know you, they're just like, who are you?
Yeah.
So that's the nice thing about traveling with the team. You build those relationships over time, and you can just give them pointers here and there, and you watch them. And, it's even things as simple as like, there's a guy who, I won't call him out by name, but he would just be so tense at the podium. And I'd have to work with him on, hey, just relax. This is just a conversation. These guys aren't trying to make you look bad. But it is really cool to see the maturity and the growth, and honestly to see them like starting families.
Yeah.
That makes you feel a little old, but it is cool to see that. I really enjoy that, and seeing them be successful, whether it's overseas in the NBA or whatever, make a career out of basketball. It's really cool, and we have tons of guys doing that.
Yeah.
Preparing champions for life. There it is. That's a great example. Tell everybody listening about your experience working that closely for that length of time with Scott Drew and that staff.
Well, I'll say it's funny because a lot of people think there's no way he's really like that. And he truly is. Like, that is how he is all the time. And it's not going to say he gets frustrated,
Yeah.
you know.
Sure.
But I've never met someone who is more capable of getting you to do what they want you to do and kind of making you feel like it's your idea.
Yeah.
You know,
Right.
he's really good at, like, he's never yelled at me or anything like that. But, like, I'm sure I've done things that have annoyed him. And, you know, you work with someone 10 years, that's going to happen.
Yeah.
But it was always just a conversation in a way of, hey, why don't we do this moving forward? And I really, it's crazy to look back because I was so nervous those first year or two working with him. And now we have the relationship where I can actually say, okay, I understand you want to do it that way, but it really makes sense for us to do it this way. And
right.
he does listen.
He listens to you, yeah.
So it's really cool. And, I mean, seeing coaches like Coach Tang go on and be successful at Kansas State, that'll be really cool to watch. Coach McCaslin at North Texas, you know. So you build relationships with all those staff members, and it's cool because it is truly a family over there. And they're all just such good guys. I mean, I don't want to give a name out, but we played a scrimmage a few years ago, and I watched the head coach in a private scrimmage, just cuss out his SID in front of everyone. And I literally was like, I would never work in that environment. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And that happens. Like, it was a good reminder for me of not everyone's like Scott Drew. You know, these guys they're intense, and he is super competitive, but just such a good person and cares about his people. And it's things like that. You know, they say things like people don't leave jobs, they leave supervisors.
Yeah.
And that's why I always wanted to stay with them, is because he treated me so well.
Yeah, what was the best part for you, or most memorable part of the national championship run? I know there were a lot of things along the way.
Highlights.
Yeah,
that's a tough one. I mean, so after the game, we go see our families. It's like 2 a.m. I have to get Jared Butler and Coach Drew on, like, Good Morning America the next morning at 5 a.m.
Wow.
And I'm like, I can't go to sleep and risk oversleep. You know, I'm more worried about making sure they're awake.
And that's all on Zoom,
yes,
correct?
it's all Zoom.
I'm just like, what if the computer stopped working?
Oh, I know.
There's so many things that could go wrong
it's
for
a
Good
mess.
Morning America.
And so anyway, we visit with our families and all that, and I've got to kill like 3 hours, and just sitting there talking with Mac and Dawn afterward, and just having this feeling of, like, I can't believe we actually did it.
Yeah.
And Jim Nance had sent us something, so we made a little video for him and sent it to him, and we actually sat out front of the hotel at that point because they let us go outside of the lobby. And I'll just never forget that, of, like, holy cow, that actually happened.
Wow.
Like, I'm sure there's other stories I could think of, but it was wild to just be there and be like, that really happened. We're the freaking national champions.
Yeah.
And we had started working on that logo in January. And I remember thinking how cool it was, and gosh, I hope we get to use this.
Yes.
You know, but the odds are low. Like, you can be the best team, and your odds of winning the NCAA tournament are what, like 10%? Like, it's
Well,
and so
there was a school named Gonzaga you had to get past.
right. And so it just, to actually get to use it. And there's little things like we got a preview when we're in the bubble after the Elite Eight. They sent us a mock-up of the Final Four ring that the NCAA provides, and here's what it'll look like if you're the champion. And the champion ring was much cooler. And we're just like, oh, I want to get that.
one.
And so for those 3 hours from after we visit with our family until we're doing Good Morning America, it's just kind of setting in of, hey, all these things we wanted to happen actually happened. Yeah. And we're going to get these cool rings, and it's just like, this will never go away. We're always going to have this national champion logo, and, you know, it's on your wall right here. I have it on a wall in my office. Like, it was just so cool to think, oh, all these things we did that we were afraid we weren't going to get to use are now getting seen.
Wow.
Do you feel like you mentioned you hope that we get to be there again, especially somewhere like Houston, so that the fans can experience the players? Do you feel like now that you've tasted the other side of winning that national championship, it seems like it's not this, okay, we've done it, cool, we have the signs in our offices. Like, what would you say the energy is like now that you've experienced that, we've all experienced that, what that looks like in the future?
So it'll never be the first again.
Right.
Like, I don't think you can ever compare it to that. But I think the energy, especially if it was at a place like Houston with the fans there, you think back to like the 2010 Elite Eight and the 40,000 Baylor fans down there. Like, it would be such a different experience having fans there where you can go up and touch them and high five them, and you couldn't do any of that in the bubble. And I think there is such a hunger and honestly such a different team. You know, I mean, the first year after a national championship, you obviously are going to have a little bit of lag of just people, you know, we did it last year. And I think that there's such turnover on rosters. You know, we have a few guys remaining from that team, but everybody took on bigger roles too. And I think that really changed too, is it's like if you're Adam Flagler, you're now a starter and you're like, hey, I need to show that I can do it. So I just think the energy is always there. And I think there's now the belief that there's just no doubt. Whereas in the past, even when you believed and thought we were the best team, you had to have a little bit of doubt.
Yeah.
And let me tell you one quick story about in the bubble that I just thought of, where we beat Houston, we're playing Gonzaga in the championship, and we sit down to do the scout, and Coach Jacobs does it. And he made you believe. Like, he goes over the scout, and I literally got up from there, and I went up to Mac, and I said, we're winning this game.
Wow.
And it was – his game plan was, like, just so perfect, and he knew them so well. And I just remember watching from my seat we get out to that 9-0 run, and it was like literally everything he said we needed to do and that was going to happen if we did it actually happened.
Wow.
And it was in that moment that I was like, we might actually win this game. and you kept waiting for Gonzaga to go on that run, and it just never happened. And then when they finally were getting a little close, Flagler hits that dagger 3 on the kick out from Jared Butler after Vital blocked the shot, all that. Anyway, it was just like in that moment, you're still nervous because we're Baylor fans. We've been through some tough times.
Right.
But you were just like, holy cow, we're actually going to win this.
Right.
And I'll never forget the feeling from watching that scout and how John Jacobs made us believe.
Yeah.
Whereas I think we were underdogs. I mean, the nation didn't necessarily think we could win that game. Gonzaga's offense is just so good. And you think back to, I'm all over the place, so I apologize.
No,
but
this is
good.
great. I'm
It's
like
a
about to
podcast.
get emotional. I'm so excited about
You think back to 4 months earlier, we're on the bus heading to go play Gonzaga in the same city.
Yeah.
And get called off because Gonzaga had some positive COVID tests.
90 minutes before you're going to tip
Right.
off, that close.
And all of these things had to happen for us to be in this situation. And truly, I think if we had played them on December 5th, that game might have gone differently because they would have known what was coming.
Yep.
And they weren't, I don't want to say they weren't prepared, but until you actually experience how physical that defense was, there's no way to really prepare for it. And I think so that worked to our benefit. You think of the COVID year, and I hear a lot of people say, okay, well, we could have won back-to-back championships. Well, maybe, but if we had won it in 1920, there's a decent chance some of those guys go ahead and go pro. And so all of those things have to work out. And I also look back, I tell this story. We were down 7 at the half to Villanova in the Sweet 16. And Davion Mitchell had been in foul trouble. It just wasn't a good half. We're at Hinkle. It's a super cool environment, but we're down. And it's like, holy cow, we could lose this game. And we just played a phenomenal second half and won easily. And I look back at that, and I'm like, 20 minutes made the difference there. Like, that second half, if we don't turn it around and we lose to Villanova, we're out in the Sweet 16 as a 1 seed. Then the next year we lose in the second round as a 1 seed. And people's opinions, the narrative changes, and people are like, oh, we can't get over the hump. Well, now Scott Drew's a Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
And that 20-minute half had to happen for that to be the case.
That's great memory.
And I just think, it's a good reminder for me of it's easy to overreact to things. And, things happen. The North Carolina game, like, incredible comeback. It would have been so cool to win that game, but, North Carolina's going to the title game. Like, they were really good.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm sure some of our fans were really disappointed and felt like we underachieved because it went out in the second round. I don't necessarily buy into that, but, it's just narrative shift, and it's easy to overreact in the moment. But I just think back to that second half, and I'm like, thank goodness we turned it around in that half.
Huge.
Because none of this would have happened, and the narrative around the program would have been, they haven't even been to an Elite Eight since 2012. Now, you could also argue on the flip side, if we don't win that, maybe we play a little more intense in the second round last year, and maybe we win that game.
Possible.
And, it's just there's all this, you call it the butterfly effect or whatever. All of this could have happened. But anyway, I'm all over the place. Sorry, let's get back on track.
No, it's all very good. David Kaye, our guest, Associate AD for External Affairs Operations. I've had the privilege of calling games, telling stories about Baylor athletics for a long time. Storytelling is an art, and there's a network in town doing just that. Rogue Media Network has produced over 80 original podcasts and shows ranging from comedy, true crime, business, and sports. If there's a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. You can find this podcast and all the other great Rogue Media Network shows on Spotify, on Apple, on YouTube, or anywhere you listen to podcasts. David, we mentioned this Friday as we record this, November 11th, is Veterans Day. Part of our timing of having you on this week is your service, and we say thank you to you and to all of our veterans for that. Overall, what was that experience like for you?
Yeah, so I joined the Army Reserve after my freshman year at Baylor. I had wanted to join after 9/11, but going off to college, just let me get situated there. And so I did basic training after the freshman year, and then sophomore year I did advanced training. And then toward the end of my junior year, I had 2 weeks left in my junior year, I get a phone call, and they're like, hey, which airport you want to fly out of?
Wow.
And I'm going,
that
what?
Casual. That's how.
Well, I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh,
Right.
my goodness.
And they're like, well, you're deploying with us. We got my home of record was in Katy.
Wow.
And they're like, our unit's meeting up in Mesquite, up near Dallas, and we just want to know which airport in Houston you want to fly out of to come up to Dallas to meet us, and then we're going to deploy. And I'm like, what? Am I being punked right now? Like,
Right.
Yeah.
And so, no, you got 2 days. And so I was like, okay, I'll fly out of Intercontinental. And, so I call my family, and I'm like, hey, this is happening. And I pack up as much as I can in my car, drive home to Katy, and just get my life in order. And then go to Mesquite, end up there for a week or two, whatever it was. And then we go to Fort Polk in Louisiana for a few months of advanced training. And my brother and my mom had to come pack up my apartment in Waco. I had to withdraw from school because, I had 2 days of notice. And Baylor was great. They were willing to let me take my finals early and everything.
Wow.
But I just didn't have time to even prepare for them. And so, anyway, end up going over to Kuwait for a month, Uzbekistan for a month, and then 10 months in Afghanistan, and then back to Kuwait for a month and back home. And got home just in time for that fall semester in 2006, I guess.
Wow.
And so because I had withdrawn, I really had only completed 2.5 years at Baylor, and could have finished in a year and a half if I'd have pushed it. But because I was working baseball, I wanted to get a second season of experience, so I extended it. I basically did 4.5 years at Baylor of actual schooling, and so it was just crazy going over there, and total 15 months deployed. And right in the middle of my college experience. And it was different coming back because all my friends had graduated, and you just looked at it a little differently, like some immaturity. I was very immature before that. And then now you're just like, is this really a problem to you?
Wow.
I bet that's right.
Yeah.
After what you'd been through.
Such a good
It's just,
point.
it was tough. But, so anyway, all that to say, then I finished out my contract. It was an 8-year contract and was honorably discharged in 2011. But yeah, I probably would have stayed in had I not met my wife.
Okay.
But that's a lot to put a family through. I have so much admiration for anyone in the military who can do that. So yeah, that's ultimately why I got out. Probably would have stayed and just made a career of it if I was single.
Yeah, that's certainly a lot. So you mentioned earlier that that's kind of during that deployment where you found your love for writing. What did that kind of look like? Was it journaling, writing letters back home, or how did you come across that?
It was journaling. I had a blog that my family kept up with. It wasn't like anything, this is really pre-social media, so it wasn't like anything that was promoted at all. It was like, hey, I'm going to write this so that my family can read it and they can share it with whoever they want to share it with, and I don't have to write a million letters.
Right.
So it was really that. And I also wrote a little bit for the Baylor Lariat while I was over there. And, so anyway, it was really the blogging, if we're honest. It was just, hey, it's an easy way to keep my family informed of what's going on. There's not a ton you can say, but just, I think for them it was helpful just to see an update from me once a week or whatever it was.
Yeah.
Very cool. Came back, and there was never any question in your mind about coming back to school, back to Baylor?
Never a doubt.
Yeah.
And it's weird because Baylor does a phenomenal job with it now, where veterans have incredible benefits at Baylor. At the time, it wasn't as good. I could have gone to school anywhere in Texas for free as a veteran. At Baylor, my GI Bill got increased, but it wasn't really, it wasn't enough to really make a huge difference. But I was already so far along at Baylor, I wanted to finish at Baylor.
Yeah.
So, no, never a doubt. It was really just a question of, am I going to get home in time for the fall semester? And anyone who's ever been through it, you have to pick your apartment, months in advance.
Yeah.
So like my mom had
like
to come
a year ahead. Sometimes
Yeah.
it feels like
I think it was like March. My mom came up to Waco and shopped for an apartment for me, and that's when she met Emily for the first time, and she kind of helped her find a place.
Now that's interesting. Your mom's meeting your wife to be,
and you're
not even here. You're out of the country.
A little bit of backstory there. I was home in the middle of the deployment. I got to come home for 2 weeks. Timed it to go to my brother's wedding. And also the Baylor A&M basketball game.
Convenient. But primarily
in that order,
wedding.
right? Right, in that order, Adam.
And I go. Baylor professor Dr. Burleson asked me to come speak to her class, and so I did. And afterward, I go back to her office with her, and she's like, "Here, you know Emily Ingram, talk to her." She hands me the phone, and I'm like, "What is going on?" And Emily goes, Dr. B wants us to go on a date. Why don't we just go get some coffee or something to make her happy?
Wow.
And she is just so miserable, and I'm like, okay, sure.
This is going well.
I don't drink coffee, and I really, I don't say this, but I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
But we're both guilted, so it's like, okay, let's just go get dinner and satisfy her, and that'll be the end of it. And so we go to hibachi, because I'm like, okay, blind date, you don't want to.
There's something to do.
Distraction.
There's something to watch. It can't go that bad if you're at a hibachi restaurant.
The hibachi chef is the show.
You're right.
And had an incredible time. We ended up going over to Damon's in the Hilton at the time.
Wow.
And had a dessert there, and then called it a night. And I had asked her, hey, do you want to go to the A&M basketball game with me the next day? And she was like, well, my mom's coming in town. I can't. And so I don't really know if that's an excuse or, who knows. Maybe she didn't have a great time.
Right.
And so like, okay, fine. I go to the game. I'm there like 2 hours early to get a front row ticket in the student section. And she calls me and is like, hey, my mom's running late. Would you want to go get lunch? And I was like, sure, come pick me up at Farrell. And so we go get lunch, and I make it back at halftime.
Oh, man.
What?
Now that's dedication right there.
You knew she was worth it.
That's it.
So, yeah. And then we talked on the phone that night until like 5 a.m.
Wow.
And I realize it's 5 a.m., and I'm like, I have to leave for my flight at 5:30.
Wow.
So and I go back overseas, and we stayed in touch for the next 6 months. And I mean, we wrote emails daily. I would call her. They had these prepaid phones over there that you could use. I got a Motorola Razr at one point, which was like
it was it at the time. Yeah.
But you had to buy the cell phone minutes from these guys on the street. 50 cents a minute to call the United States.
Oh, my God.
So we talked for like 10 minutes in the morning and 10 minutes in the evening, and, $10 a day of cell phone bills. But, it was – so we just – like I said, we just stayed in touch. Never anything. It was like, hey, I don't – you live your life for these next 6 months, and we'll see what happens. And she was not interested in that. She was wanting to build the relationship with me. And it worked so well because you really get to know someone so much better that way. And you don't have all the drama of early dating there's just lots that happens when you start dating someone. And this took a lot of that out. It was just, hey, let's just get to know each other. Yeah. And so, anyway, long story short, she met my mom when my mom came up there. And then she's waiting for me at Fort Polk when we landed with my family. And she tells the story, and she's so, she felt so awkward because she had just met a few of my family members at that time, and she's like, why am I even here? We've been on 2 dates. And, a little over a year later, we got engaged, and a year after that, we got married.
What a great
the
story.
Rest is history. Thank you, Dr. Burleson. Goodness gracious.
Yeah, we have a great picture at our wedding with her.
That's cool. Cassie Burleson, way to go.
Yeah. So definitely did not want to be set up on a blind date. Either one of us. Like, we both were truly dreading it. And turned out great.
Hibachi, I'm laughing so hard. I'm picturing the listeners in college that are like, maybe I'll do hibachi this weekend.
Shout out to Damon's, too. Damon's long gone.
Yeah, and I had just bought an 05 Mustang because, like any military guy, you make some cash, and you're like, I got to buy a new car.
Yeah.
And I pull up to pick her up, and she's like, well, this ain't going to work because she has an 05 Mustang.
Really?
Oh, my goodness.
I made her, in our engagement pictures, take a picture with the cars. And she was so like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
This is stupid. And I was like, no, it'll be a funny one, 20 years from now.
Yeah.
But it's just wild how that all worked out. But God's timing is perfect.
That's a great story. And you and Emily have fostered some kids through the years. I know you're a big believer in that process.
Yeah, so we tried to have kids of our own, and it just never worked out. And we felt very called to foster care. and adoption. And so we did what's called foster to adopt, which is you're basically hoping to adopt, but truly tried to look at it as that's a secondary hope. The first hope is that they get reunited with their parents. We wouldn't want our family to be started because another family got broken up.
Yeah.
And so
point.
2014, we go through all the training and we get a call, hey, do you want to take these two boys? And we felt passionate about taking a sibling group. A good friend of mine who actually was a student worker here at Baylor, Mark Jezik, had been adopted with his brother. And just my sister had told me stories. She's a PA at MD Anderson. Anyway, long story short, we felt passionate about a sibling group. I'm going really long. And they call us and say, hey, we have two brothers. One's 3.5 and one's 5 months. Would you be interested? And we're like, okay, this is it. We're taking them. Yeah. And Jaden and Jordan showed up at our house like 2 hours later.
Wow.
And immediately we had this feeling of these boys are not going to be staying with us. Like you could just tell Jaden was raised well. And anyway, that process dragged on for a year. They were with us for a year. Wow. And they got reunited with their parents after that. And it was just a ridiculous process. It shouldn't have taken that long. The parents did everything they needed to do. They should have gone back at like 6 months. But the system can be difficult. So had them for a year. We got to maintain a relationship with them. We still get occasional updates on them. They live out of state now. But super cool to watch them grow up from afar. Then we had a baby named Compton for a couple months, and he got reunited. His mother had grown up in foster care, and her foster parents wanted to take him. So they're considered. They call it fictive kin, and so they basically had first rights to him. And we were fully supportive of that. Yeah. So broke our hearts, but he went to them, and everything. We had lost touch, but I hope doing great. Yeah. And then the last one was named Hayes, and we had him for 4 or 5 months, and we really thought that was going to be it. And the agents actually called us and said, "We know you're struggling right now, but we think this kid's coming to adoption. We think he's perfect for you." And so we struggled, and we ultimately said, "Yes, we'll take him." And he'd already been in foster care for a year, and came to us. Oh my gosh, we love that kid. And then things just changed, and his parents they were on the right track, and the judge said, hey, if they continue on the right track, he can go back to his parents. And, hey, we support that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, this is what we've said we believe all along. And fortunately, he did get reunited with his parents, and they're doing great, and we stay in touch with them. Wow. But, yeah, so your plans don't really matter. Like, we made plans. We thought we were going to do foster to adopt. We ended up just doing foster, and who knows what the future holds. But it was really cool, and you feel like you have 4 kids kind of spread out all over the world now. Yeah. And, I hope someday we get to reunite with them. Yeah. But
that would be fun.
Yeah, that's cool.
All right, Katie, a conversation with David Kaye cannot end without at least a mention of One-Man Wolfpack.
The One-Man Wolfpack.
City League softball team. David's right in the middle of it, has been the manager of the team, star pitcher, injured right now. Injured in a couple of ways. One from softball, one not from softball. Yeah. But just a quick shout-out to our audience about One-Man Wolfpack.
One-Man Wolfpack started in 2010, the official D-League softball team of Baylor Athletics.
That's right.
12 years. Wow. I knew it had some history. I did not know it went back to 2010.
Winning pedigree also.
9-time champions.
9-time champions.
Yeah, close to winning our 10th this year. We got next week to decide that. But yeah, it started as a group of Baylor Athletics guys who, hey, let's go play City League softball. And it's morphed, and it's, now there's only – I'm the only one actually from the original team still around. But yeah, just a fun thing. Like we like to be. It's fun to have something to be competitive in. Yeah. And we try to not take ourselves too seriously, but at the end of the day, you're still playing a game and you want to win. Yeah. And so yeah, we get out there. We play on Monday nights at Riverbend Park. The city does a great job running those games. And I was actually moved to second base maybe a month ago, and I took a sharp grounder, took a bad hop off my knee. So that's the softball injury. And I actually have a broken finger now from a different, unrelated to softball. Right. I have a broken finger, so I'm out for the year.
So who's on second base right now?
That changes week to week.
No, who's on first?
Who's on third?
What's on second?
You're irreplaceable, David Kaye.
But no, I'm usually the pitcher. My brother's the catcher, which is funny. We recreated a Little League photo.
That's pretty cool.
Ago. But yeah,
that's fun. One man Wolfpack going strong. We're proud of this success.
We really are.
Of one man Wolfpack.
Check us out on Twitter at Waco One Man Wolfpack.
Very good. David, thanks for your time. We appreciate it. Thanks for sharing. And we do figuratively salute you on Veterans Day. Appreciate your service and the service of all the veterans that are out there. And the game this Saturday is Salute to Heroes Day, so that'll be fun. David, we appreciate you being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Have you been looking for a new podcast to listen to? Are you interested in true crime, funny one-star reviews, or inspiring stories? What about the history of Waco or the famous people who have lived and worked here? All these and more are produced by Rogue Media Network. There are over 80 different shows, including this one, with more coming all the time. If there's a story to tell, Rogue Media Network is telling it. Watch on YouTube or listen now wherever you get your podcasts, or watch on YouTube.
That's our Sick 'em podcast for this week, powered by Rogue Media Network. We appreciate you being with us. For Katie Smith, for David Kaye, I'm John Morris. We'll be back next week with another edition of the Sick 'em podcast.
You've been listening to the Sick 'em podcast, powered by Rogue Media Network. The Sick 'em podcast is a production of Baylor Athletics.